Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show. Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune at Haugh after the third day of practice. Dan, a lot going on the field, a lot of talking off of it. Busy day for Ryan Poles. We had him as a guest on the Mully and Haugh Show with Leila Rahimi sitting in. He also made his rounds after practice at Haugh. Let's start there. What did he have to say? How are things going? Good start for the Bears. It's very early, still July.
Yeah, no question. Second day of practice. Obviously Tuesday was just the reporting day and the conditioning test and all those things. Today felt like the first real day of training camp because we were outside. There were fans in attendance. There was a buzz in the air. It felt like, okay, this is finally training camp here. And it was a fun day, hot, humid, a sweltering day out on the practice fields. But then, as you mentioned, Ryan Poles came to speak with us a little bit after practice just to reiterate what he saw in Cole Kmet that allowed him to sign him to a 4-year extension with $50 million tacked onto that. A little bit north, I think, at 32.5 guaranteed in that deal. And so what you have here is a very promising start to training camp in the sense that you've now taken a player that's homegrown, that's drafted and developed, and given him an extension that, in Ryan's view, also energizes the locker room because they see, okay, they take care of their own here. When guys meet the standard, we are going to reward them for that. I did think it was interesting that Ryan Poles said that he liked Cole coming out of Notre Dame and saw some things on tape in Notre Dame when he was in Kansas City, but was truly sold on him after listening to the Take the North podcast all of last season and hearing the reviews that of Cole on this show. So maybe we should get a cut of that 50 mil.
That's funny because I think we have been high on Cole Kmet, and yet I was surprised at the size of the contract. Maybe I shouldn't have been. $32.8 million guaranteed for a tight end that has averaged 45 passes and receptions in his first 3 seasons. That's an investment on the future. It's more like contracts typically are. The projections for future performance more than past results. And I think that it's an understandable one. Let's start there because during this podcast, we're going to hear from Cole Kmet. We're going to hear from Chase Claypool, his former Notre Dame teammate in college and now current Chicago Bear teammate in the same offense. And, of course, Ryan Poles, who addressed a lot of things on the radio and at Haugh. But, Dan, the Cole Kmet contract itself, 11th highest among tight ends, I believe, in the NFL, according to Spot Rack. And I wonder that seems fair. It seems like it's not an overspend. Is this just the price that teams are going to have to pay for a tight end as maybe dynamic or as versatile as Cole Kmet these days? Were you at all struck by the size of the deal?
Versatile is a good word there, David, because I think what you see in Cole is he's been able to do whatever they've asked him to do. And I think that's one of the things in his toolbox that allows him to win over Luke Getsy, that allows him to win over Matt Eberflus, that allows him to win over Ryan Poles is the fact that, your role may not be exactly as you envisioned it coming out of Notre Dame and after spending 1 year in a previous regime with Ryan Pace drafting you and Matt Nagy overseeing your first year development. Well, now you've shown us over time, since Ryan Poles and his team got here, that you have developed, that you are continuing to expand your skill set, that you were a threat inside the red zone last year, that you did score 7 touchdowns, that you became a friendly target for Justin Fields when he needed you to be a friendly target. And so this is a vote of confidence in the future here that I think is really positive, really promising. And certainly for Cole, it's the latest chapter in what's been a dream come true in his football journey. Obviously being a local kid who has dreamt of playing for the Bears and now gets to play for them for a lot longer.
Before we get to what he had to say specifically, and I want to begin with that because I think that's a good launching point for this podcast, I want to ask you this, and I asked Ryan Poles this, and we'll get to his answer later. With the contract comes great responsibility or awareness of what you earn. It's the oddest thing about pro sports, but it is the reality, and you get paid a ton of money. So all of a sudden, Cole Kmet potentially changes from this feel-good story about the local guy made good to, oh my God, can you believe that he only had 2 targets and 1 catch and he's making this per game? When you break that down per series and per catch, all of a sudden that feel-good story has the potential to turn ugly fast. I hope that doesn't happen. We've seen it happen before. How do you think, number one, he's equipped to handle that personality-wise? And number two, do you think that the size of the contract implies a bigger role in this offense.
Well, when you sit in the general manager's chair, there's two things that you have to at least consider, sometimes be worried about, sometimes be concerned with when you give a huge contract extension or a huge contract of any kind out. It's number one, will the player stay motivated and will the payday somehow take away from some of the juice that they've brought to the table up to this point, or will it go the other direction and will the player be over motivated and trying too hard to justify the money that he's been paid, which is what you kind of bring up there. This need to prove that you're worth every single cent that was written into the contract of your deal. I think Cole is so mature and such a professional, and I think it gives Ryan Poles and his teams just such ease that they understand that he's accountable, that he understands what this grind is, that he knows how to go about his business. And so there's no worry on either side of the equation as far as that goes. Now, again, the football season will start here in September, and Cole Kmet will have to produce on an every week basis for people in the outside world to, not be talking about the contract every week. You want to be talking about who Cole is as an asset to the offense, who he is as a chess piece for Luke Getsy, who he is as a support system for Justin Fields. And I think that internally, the belief is that he's going to be everything they think he's going to be. And now we'll just kind of watch it play out when the season starts.
I also think it's interesting because he is the first member of the 2020 Bears draft class to sign a contract extension. And it also, what you just said and I asked the question because it's there, we've seen it happen, but so much of it is out of his control.
Right.
It's not like a hitter in baseball or a shooter in basketball where you feel the pressure and the anxiety affects how tightly you squeeze the bat or how tight you are when you're shooting the ball. I think Cole Kmet's a tight end, and how he gets, how many receptions he has may not even be in his control all the time. Now,
Right.
if he's wide open in the end zone and he lets the ball go through his hands because of whatever reason, then you start to speculate, well, maybe he's feeling the pressure. But really, I don't know that he's always going to be the one most responsible for how many catches he has on a given Sunday.
Right. And look, like I think Ryan Poles understands the steadiness that Cole brings to the table. And that's part of the reward here is that you want guys in that locker room that can be steady, that can understand that, it isn't always in your control and you don't have to fight for statistical values and milestones. You just have to try to contribute to successful football on an every week basis. And Cole prioritizes himself accordingly. I think to your point, I think it's really interesting on, I guess it's Wednesday, that Cole finds out 20 minutes before practice that months of negotiations have finally turned into a deal, and he expressed it as relief. Is finally able to just kind of go, okay, because he said, like, when you're playing football, you can go out there and you can control things. When you're in the middle of a contract negotiation, you're just stuck in a state of letting your representation and the front office members of the team you play for battle that out, and so you're kind of helpless. And so I did think it was interesting to hear some of those sentiments from Cole on Wednesday. We've got a couple of those clips right here.
Cool when you get two sets of you call it regimes, coming, one that obviously believes in me enough to draft me, and then a new one that comes in that believes in me enough to give me an extension. So it's pretty cool. It's a good feeling, and just kind of attest to all the work that I put in and just what I've been doing the past 3 years.
Cole, what's the most stressful part of the uncertainty that you went through the last few weeks?
I think just not knowing what's going to happen. It's the one scenario where, like, when I'm out in the field, I can control what's going on because I'm in control of, hey, like, I got to go cut off this defensive end, or I got to go win this route, or whatever it may be. Like, I'm in control of that. But when you're in these negotiation talks, like, everything's kind of done at that point. Like, there wasn't play going on. There's nothing I could go out and do. So you're just kind of waiting and seeing, and I can't control Ryan's thoughts on what he truly thinks about me. He has an opinion one way or the other, and you just kind of sit there hoping, and it's kind of this controlless feeling, but I'm glad it was able to work out.
That's interesting because he references Ryan, and he could be talking about either one. Ryan Pace drafted him. Ryan Poles now gives him the contract extension, and he's really been the same player for both regimes. He hasn't changed necessarily his role. His skill set's not going to change, but I do think it goes back to that versatility. And as I said this morning on the radio, I think Cole Kmet has been rewarded for being a foundational guy. This is almost a culture signing and investment, Dan, as much as it is a weapon in the offense. Yeah, he could maybe, have a big season and lead the Bears in receptions again. I don't expect that, but I do think he's going to lead the Bears as a leader, as a guy that sets an example. And I think they're paying for that because those are the kinds of intangibles that I think Ryan Poles wants to value, and now he's investing in it, putting his money where his mouth is.
I think it also amplifies Cole's voice in that locker room and gives him a status now that allows him to resonate with the entire room. Not that he wasn't already. I just think it takes it again, it amplifies it. It turns the volume up a little bit on what he says and where they want to go. Now, again, the production has to match all of these things, but you've established him, right? Like you financially established him as a major part of your nucleus in your core. And now it's all about going forward from here.
So he went 43rd in overall in the second round of the 2020 draft. 6 picks later, the Pittsburgh Steelers chose Chase Claypool. There was some debate in town whether or not that would make sense for the Bears at 43. They took the tight end. Claypool goes to the Steelers. Hey, look now, a couple years later, they're teammates, and they get to the benefit of both former Notre Dame players. I think Chase Claypool's an interesting guy, Dan, as we talked about the last pod, and everyone knows in Chicago, he was on the PUP list, then he wasn't on the PUP list. He had his first practice. From what I understand, it was fine, not going to overreact to any practice in July, but he did talk about all that he has been through in the last week or this offseason to get here. How would you describe his state of mind based on what you heard?
Well, yeah. So we spoke with Chase after Wednesday's practice, and I think he is motivated, and those are his words, that the motivation keeps building for him to kind of prove to people here within the organization at the Chicago Bears and to the people of Chicago who he thinks he is as a receiver. Now, I think you and I both kind of scratch our head and believe there may be a little bit of a disconnect between who Chase believes he is as an NFL receiver and who he actually is. And that's some of the battle that he's going to have to fight in trying to establish himself as an important part of this team, because you can get trapped into trying to prove the naysayers wrong too often. Chase was a little defensive on Wednesday in terms of what has been said about him in certain pockets of the outside world, as far as, I don't know if commitment is the right word, but his ability to hit the ground running in 2023. And he said that everything that's out there isn't all rooted in reality. Well, the reality is he missed multiple weeks of organized team activity practices. He missed the entire mandatory minicamp. And then on Sunday, 2 days before training camp began, he was on the PUP list. That wasn't concocted or created in some media-driven world. Now he's back on the practice field. He has to progress through 6.5 weeks of training camp without interruptions, with plenty of production. And he's got to show this coaching staff, this quarterback, this offensive staff, that he can be a meaningful piece in every single game plan they put together from September through January. And it's up to him to go prove that now. My thing is okay, if you're motivated to go prove that, then go prove that. If you're over motivated and you've got rabbit ears and you've got antennas and you know everything that's being said about you in the media and everything that's being said about you in social media, and your family's keeping you up to speed with what people are talking about you on Twitter, you can get distracted pretty easily. And so for me, that's the level of concern that I have going into the season with Chase Claypool. But I do understand him kind of expressing that now that he's turned the page from 2022 to 2023, he can feel a little bit more at ease with the people around him at Hallis Hall, and we'll see where it goes from here. But yeah, look, like we had a chance to ask him some questions on Wednesday, and one of the things he talked about was his approach to learning the offense, and here's some of what Chase had to say on Wednesday.
I made cue cards, and I think DJ giggled at me when he came in and saw all my cue cards that I had. But I would basically just test myself, and then if I got one wrong, I put it to the side, go through my cue cards, and then go through the ones I got wrong, and do that every day until I didn't get any wrong.
It would say like a play or a concept on it?
Yeah, so it'd say the play on the front, and then on the back it would have the actual drawing of it. So I would just read the play, and then I set something up in the indoor where I had an AirPod in, and I had an audio recording of me saying the play. And then I ran the play, and then the play would pop up after. So pretty intuitive stuff right there.
That's pretty detailed. And I think when he gets to that level of detail, number one, I think that you like to hear that because it does show a level of commitment. But I do think that having been around athletes for a very long time, it does speak to maybe a degree of defensiveness that is easy to detect. And that's maybe even a little understandable given how much he has been questioned. Everything about being injury prone, to his approach, to his outbursts, to his emotions, all those things. Really, we have questioned about Chase Claypool since he got to Chicago last November, and I get why, because it's all valid. He's never going to be able to without production, he's never going to be able to change that he is the guy that Mike Tomlin gave up on. And around football people, that's going to be something that he's just going to have to outgrow by producing. And that's the only way he can do that.
Chase wouldn't share with us sort of what the injury ailments were during the spring and summer that kept him out of those off-season practices. And so we're left guessing on that front. We're left guessing on whether or not he actually had a knee issue coming out of the workouts in Miami, which Justin Fields alluded to, but Chase said wasn't accurate. And so when you play these guessing games, it's just like, okay, it's open for a wide array of interpretation. I do think that he was pretty forthright in saying that when you arrive with a team in the middle of a season, you can kind of pressure yourself into doing what we were just talking about with Cole Kmet and trying to prove yourself, and it can get stressful and you can put too much pressure on yourself and you can almost suffocate yourself with your want to show that you belong and show that you're productive. And I think he feels comfort now that he does have a bond with Justin Fields, that he does have a rapport with DJ Moore and Darnell Mooney, that he can kind of lean back on some of that history to move past some of the rough spots that he has. But look, like, it's a long grind. It starts in late July. It doesn't end till mid-January. You have to find a level of emotional steadiness to survive this. We all know that. And Chase has got to be on that car.
And that he has to find a motivation somewhere deep within him. And he was asked about that. And it sounds like, based on his answer, he realizes the stakes.
It's the biggest year of my life, and I understand that. And if anyone thinks my work ethic isn't matching that, they're deeply mistaken. This is I get motivated and it just keeps building on top of each other. My work ethic grows from the last year. It'll grow after this year. I learn from things. I'm always growing, just like everyone in the world should be. They should always grow and learn from their mistakes. The goal is the same at the end of the day. It's to win football games. And my contract year aside, I want to win football games. So.
Chase, in the spring, Justin mentioned that he felt an attitude change from you for the better. How would you describe what changed for you from the end of last year to what he was describing?
Yeah, I think once I started getting more comfortable in the system and around the guys, and I was able to be myself a little more. I wasn't so stressed. I was getting more sleep. I was able to help guys around me be the leader that I want to be. So I think it was just that's kind of played hand in hand with each other.
Good answers, Dan. I thought that the follow-up was legit. And also, I don't want to be gullible or naive. We've all been around professional athletes, Chicago Bears, frankly, who talk a good game and are very convincing. And then on the field, it's more of the same. I don't know which Chase Claypool we're going to get, but I do know this. He is capable of being an asset. And he is a talent that has some explosiveness. And if he can stay motivated and focused and healthy, he is going to have, I think, a very big contract year.
Well, as you heard, he sees it as the biggest year of his life, and that's a good way to approach it. And you approach it with a attacking mentality to go make the most of the biggest year of your life, and we'll see where it all leads. Because this is a pivotal year for the Bears as a team, and Chase Claypool is a big part of where this team can go and where they may not go. And so you say, which one will we get? We may get them all. We may get Chase Claypool A for 1 week. We may get Chase Claypool B for another week. We'll see. But I think that the key is to probably try to refine that so that you are one person that everyone can expect the same out of every single day you come here. And I think that's what some of the internal push here from front office execs, from coaches, is to Chase Claypool, is to understand that steadiness piece. We just talked about Cole Kmet and the rewards he got for being steady and dependable. It should be a really good conversation that two former Fighting Irish teammates can have about, hey, this is kind of how I've approached it for 3 years. Maybe borrow a page from this playbook and see where it leads you.
Hey, can you believe Brian Kelly has a Cajun accent now? Yeah. So moving on, he is here because Ryan Poles pulled the trigger on the trade last November. They gave up a 32nd overall pick, which is equivalent of a first rounder, to get Chase Claypool in a Bears uniform. Ryan Poles has been he was aggressive. He wasn't afraid to make the big trade early. It was interesting in the offseason that to move back with the Panthers. Ryan Poles did a lot of talking in the offseason. I'm glad he's still talking. The transparency's been a little surprising, Dan, or at least the accessibility. Maybe I should put it that way. He has not been hard to find, and I enjoyed our conversation on the Mully and Haugh show on Thursday morning when he made himself available. A couple things stood out. We'll touch on a few, but one was when we asked him about the defensive line and the defensive edge rusher and the kinds of things that go into, supplementing, I think, the Bears' weakest position. Did you hear that as one of the things that stood out to you in that conversation?
Yeah, there's no question, because that's one of the biggest unchecked boxes for the 2023 Chicago Bears that we're all sitting here waiting to see what Ryan does with his pencil. Are you going to check this box? Are you not? How disciplined do you want to be? His basic response to all that is it takes two to tango, and there's a lot of negotiating that goes on back and forth, whether it's trying to sign a free agent, whether it's trying to talk through terms of a potential trade with another team. There's a lot there. First of all, I want to commend you and Leila. You did a great job with him on the air, and I'm very appreciative of how at ease Ryan has been really since he's gotten here. You can just feel a comfort that he has in front of the cameras, in front of the mics, engaging in conversation. And he explained it to you guys as a want to explain why they do what they do, and that's a great, great trait to have as a general manager, particularly in a city like this with a fan base as big as this is, because people will listen, right? And they'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and they certainly want to hear your reasoning for everything you do, and then we can have more detailed, informed discussions rather than guessing games that we've had for good chunks of the last quarter century.
Really no part of the team that's a finished product. There's guys that are developing in those position rooms and continuing to grow as players. And then, as I've said from the day I walked in here, we will exhaust our efforts in terms of finding players that can come in and enhance our team. So we're always looking to add. We're always looking to develop our own. And if we find a match of someone that can come in and help us, we're going to do that, and we'll be aggressive with it. Again, I've mentioned this a few times, there's a lot more that goes into it than us just identifying talent and saying, hey, let's go get this guy. There's another side to it. There's a financial piece to it. There's also the part where I have to stay disciplined in this approach and not just do things for the moment where it's going to hurt us down the road. And that's the hardest part of this job is taking care of the now, but also making sure that we're staying healthy long term. So again, our mission statement here is to be successful for a long period of time and sustain success. So I got to take all of those things into consideration, and that gets very complicated at times. But we are going to stay opportunistic, and we're going to continue to develop the guys that are here.
So, Dan, obviously there have been reports about the edge rusher Justin Houston has been rumored to be on the Bears' radar. Yannick Ngakoue remains unsigned and maybe on the Bears' radar. Ryan Poles did not sound like somebody in that answer and consistent with his offseason approach to take too big of a risk on a player who might be asking for more than he's willing to pay.
Yeah, I mean, look, we go back to March and what we talked about heading into free agency in just terms of staying consistent with what your value is and staying within those parameters. Ryan is disciplined. He promised us he was going to be disciplined. He's shown us that he's going to be disciplined, and who knows how that shakes out in the long run with this particular position group. But that's certainly a driving force behind where the Bears are and where they may be in the coming weeks and months.
He was a lot more forthcoming talking about the offensive line. I think he referred to himself as an O-line nerd.
Yeah.
And he was very excited as you saw him when he met the media on day one on the reporting day. And then all you got to do is mention Darnell Wright or the other offensive linemen and what they're up to. But when I asked him about Darnell Wright and crushing the conditioning test, which was really something that they're proud of, I liked his answer and just what the expectations are for the rookie first rounder.
Because if any big human being that had to do a conditioning test understands the anxiety that comes with it. So he was prepared, and I just wanted to make that point because, there's no worse feeling when, your first round pick or any rookie shows up and he's completely out of shape. So he did things on his own. He was disciplined. When there wasn't, college structure around him. So I thought that was pretty cool. In terms of the impact, listen, we will see impact. He's a big human being. He's explosive. But at the same time, we got to be realistic. He's a first-year player that's going to have ups and downs. But what I do know about him and his makeup and how he plays, he can be and he's going to finish and he's going to fight. If he gets beat, he's coming back the next play. So there will be ups and downs. That will happen. He'll continue to improve and become a pro over time. But in terms of just the size, athletic combination, that should definitely stand out.
I love that description. That's fun for us in radio. Is that a trait you look for in your offensive lineman as a whole?
Yeah, it is a trait. You want that. They may not all have it to the same level, but you got to have a little bit in you to play this game at a high level.
A little bit of nasty. I'm glad we beeped that out on our podcast. We did not do that in the morning show. So
yeah, I almost hit the rumble strips on 294 when I was listening to that. Oh gosh, they missed one.
Well, I think that kind of it's a very good example, though, when he starts talking about offensive linemen, you know what he likes. And I think that's good news for Darnell Wright. It's good news for Tevin Jenkins, which might explain why he's now at his third different position on the Bears offensive line, hopefully to find a home at left guard. But this offensive line, because of the addition of Darnell Wright, you have two bookend young tackles now, it has Ryan Poles excited about the future.
Well, look, I think it's important that we keep Darnell Wright in the spotlight for the next 6 weeks or so, because this is the cornerstone piece of the draft class for 2023. It's the first round pick that Ryan Poles has had a chance to make as a general manager. And it's easy during training camp to just get fixated on the quarterback, to get fixated on the skills position guys, to ignore the guys in the trenches that are doing all the heavy lifting and dirty work during training camp. And so look, like, the pads will come on next week. I think it's August 2nd that Matt Eberflus said that the Bears will have their first padded practice. That takes things up to a whole nother level for Darnell Wright. There will be preseason action as we go. There will be those crossover practices in Indy. And at every step along the way in the preseason, keeping Darnell Wright in our focus is important, because he is a very, very important piece to where this Bears team wants to go and where it can go in the near future.
The last thing I think in terms of the conversation with Ryan Poles on the radio worth touching on for our Take the North audience was his relationship with Kevin Warren. You know well about Kevin Warren after doing the big story in the Tribune last weekend, the deep dive. And you know that since he arrived, that one of the more interesting dynamics would be between Ryan Poles, the general manager, and Kevin Warren, almost in I don't want to project or say that it doesn't need it, but like the paternal aspect of Kevin Warren is kind of a fatherly presence over the young general manager. That doesn't diminish anything about Ryan Poles' ability to do the job. It just seems like that's the kind of connection that they possibly could have. And really, when each guy talks about the other, that's kind of what I envision.
Well, yeah. And so why don't we listen to what Ryan had to say, and then I'll tack onto it, because I thought his answer to your question about how Kevin's been influential and valuable to him was pretty notable.
Word I would use is partner. Ever since he's been in here, I feel like I have a partner that is highly supportive in what we're doing. I love the fact that he asks good questions. I love the fact that he wants to be involved. Quite frankly, with how busy both of our days are, we carve out time to spend talking about just life and our families. And we talk about the big decisions that may be coming up, and we work through those things. And I can give him some understanding of, again, why we're doing what we're doing. But the biggest thing to me is I have a partner that is he's there for me. I see him also as a mentor who's been through a lot. He's seen different things. So I can ask him really tough questions when I'm trying to make the most sound decision possible for an organization, which oftentimes is not black or white. It's always gray. There's always a 50-50, 51-49. Like it's not just like green light or red light. So I can't express to you how excited and happy and fortunate I am to have him in this building.
David, what comes oozing out of that soundbite is how genuine Ryan Poles' emotions are to the guy who is now his boss, right? That's a significant word that he uses, partner. That means a lot to the guy who is putting together the entire roster of the Chicago Bears. To have this sounding board, to have this resource, to have this access to connections and insight and wisdom is truly meaningful to Ryan Poles. And when we talk about Kevin Warren and his oversight of the Chicago Bears, I think it's pretty inarguable to say that the most important relationship that he has in this building right now is with Ryan Poles, because it's going to be the most meaningful to to where this franchise goes, particularly as it relates to the football product. And to hear both of those men speak, again, it's not fluff. It's not phony. It's not, hey, I'm going to say this nice thing about my coworker just because I have to, because the microphones are on. You feel the sincerity coming through from both those guys, and that's notable. Can it last? Hopefully. Is it real right now? Absolutely.
And also, you do feel a sense that for a lot of people who've been around the beat for a long time, as you have, as I have, you do sense a professionalized approach that hasn't always been obvious. You feel that sense of stability, that partnership, if you will, that it is more real than it's been than maybe it has been in past years. And I think that's just, it's going to be gradual, but I think we're starting to see some of the effects of what happens when you have a very strong leader at the top of the hierarchy.
One of the things that we have consistently criticized this organization for over the years is the inability to view things through a sophisticated football lens.
Exactly.
Well, now you have that sophisticated football lens, and on a daily basis, right? Like I know that Ryan and Kevin have scheduled weekly meetings where there's literally an itinerary printed out and they go through things. But then on the daily basis, they're right across the hall from each other. They pop in and out of each other's offices. They talk shop. They hit on really basic issues. They hit on really deep issues, and they make progress. And that's a big deal for this organization.
Well, the last point on that is that it struck me when Ryan Poles was talking about the discipline he needs to have so he doesn't overreact and overspend on hypothetically Ngakoue or Justin Houston or the next edge rusher to pop open. That discipline is rooted in kind of a meticulous approach to every day and every month and every portion of the offseason. And there's nothing, as you know, from having reported this and just based on reputation, now having read your story, there's nothing that defines Kevin Warren's approach to every day more than the word meticulous.
Right.
Everything is organized, structured, and there's a purpose. And I think that's what I think they seem to have in common. And that's why I think that this partnership is off to such a good start.
It's cool. I mean, it's really cool to observe in the early stages, and hopefully it'll only continue to grow and build and develop. The Bears have a lot more ahead of them than what they've done, obviously, in Kevin's first 3+ months on the job and Ryan's first year and a half. One of the things Ryan said to me last month, David, was that he knows that he has someone in his corner that when he asks for something that he expresses need for his football operation, he knows there's not going to be a lot of unnecessary question asking or pushback on it, because Kevin understands exactly what they're both about. And so hopefully that helps the wheels move a little bit more efficiently and quickly.
Speaking of Kevin Warren, on Thursday afternoon, the Bears released a joint statement from Kevin Warren and the Chicago Mayor, Brandon Johnson. Now, I'll just read it real quickly. This pertains to the stadium project, which obviously is focused on Arlington Heights, but still includes other possible alternatives. Chicago remains one of those alternatives. And in that vein, the joint statement says, quote, "We continued our productive discussion this week that began in early June. We plan to have regular dialogue with each other and across our respective staffs as we work together to meet the needs of the citizens of Chicago and Bears fans." End of quote. So it's essentially just attention Arlington Heights. We still are keeping our options open. We're still going to have this dialogue with the city just in case. But basically, this is just some weak leverage that we're trying to maintain.
Officials from Rickton Park also weighed in earlier in the week. I don't even know where Rickton Park is or what it has to offer. I do know that they're near a train line, and for some reason that felt like it was worth rolling the dice and sending a letter to Kevin Warren's office to see if they can get in the mix.
By September, it will be an even longer list. Okay, Dan, so on the field, real quickly, anything that stands out? First 2 days of practice, the first 2 practices, not a whole lot to see. A lot of organization, a lot of people getting their feet back under them. Anything stand out to you? How does Justin Fields look is what everybody wants to know.
Well, I'll start with Tyler Scott first, because the first moment of camp was a Justin Fields to Tyler Scott long ball in one-on-ones. Tyler Scott got open down the left sideline. Justin Fields threw him a perfectly thrown ball, and you've got that first ooh from the people that were in the bleachers here at Haugh, which is always a milestone moment every summer when you get that first ooh moment. Justin had a few more of those connections to DJ Moore. It's now an expectation that every single day that we come out here, there's going to be some Fields to Moore highlight that gets people buzzing for a little while. I will say that in the 7-on-7 portion of things today, a little bit choppy, a little bit inconsistent, ball on the ground a little too much. I had a chance to ask Luke Getsy after practice what are the things that he looks for in 7-on-7. He said, look, it's just measuring the footwork, the timing, the rhythm, seeing whether the footwork is taking the quarterback through the progression, whether his eyes are going to the right places at the right time. That needs to sharpen up as we go through camp, because as you know, you can't go through 7-on-7 periods where you got 4 or 5, 6, 7 balls on the ground. It's got to be boom, 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 balls out, goes where it needs to go, guy catches it and runs. So I think we're going to be experience a lot of that over the next 6 weeks, where there's going to be the wow moments in camp, and then there's going to be a couple periods where you go, gah, yeah, this is still a work in progress, and it's not where everyone wants it to be just yet.
Looking forward to the first padded practice. That will be next Wednesday, August 2nd. Looking forward to talking about what progress is made over the weekend. I think we'll get back together at the beginning of next week, kind of reset things and where the week is headed. Other than that, I think we covered as much as it's been a busy couple days, but I think we got to all the high points. Anything that we left off, Dan?
No, I mean, I would just say that the Bears are pretty healthy. The only player on the 90-man roster that didn't participate today is Dante Pettis, who's on the non-football injury list. Matt Eberflus expressed on Wednesday that he expects him back soon. And so so far, knock on wood here, that they're pretty healthy, and that's a good sign. Good
sign early at Haugh. Training camp has begun. The first week is nearly in the books, and we will be here next week to bring you more on the Take the North podcast, which you can get on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. You want to review us, rate us, give us some feedback. All that we can take it. And you can watch us at 670 The Score's YouTube page as well. For Dan Wiederer and Adam Sadzinski, our producer, I'm David Haugh on the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. We'll talk to you next time on Take the North.
Great talk. See you out there.